Welcome to the Jerich Show, featuring your hosts Javvad and Erich Krohn. Timely topics, poorly presented.
Hello and welcome to the Jerich Show. I, as always, am Javvad Malik, and alongside me today is one of my favorite colleagues of all time. I used to work with him at 451 Research. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Adrian Sanabria. How are you doing, sir?
I'm thrilled to be on here, thrilled to be finally talking to you. I guess I have to come onto a podcast to talk to you these days.
I know, it feels that way.
We have to link it in with work somehow.
That's the only reason why I started the podcast, to give me an excuse to talk to my friends.
Well played.
Yeah. You know, this is funny because we actually, when we both worked at 451, we tried to get a podcast off the ground a couple of times. And we just crashed and burned. So
it's fine. I mean, you know, trial and error. That's how things get good. You know, you look at any really good podcast. Go back to the first episode. It's probably awful.
Yeah, it's shocking. And speaking of awful, I have to introduce my co-host, Erich. How you doing?
You know, I'm doing all right. And Adrian, I got to tell you, if you look at our first episode, it was really bad. We're hoping that the next podcast will actually be quality, though. So this is all still practice for the real one to come.
All right. I'm glad to help. Lend a hand where I can.
So shall we jump into the news? That's what people are here for. They're not here to listen to witty banter or look at Eric's face.
They're going to get it regardless.
So let's see. This is a new cybercrime tool, can build phishing pages in real time. So there are some bad guys out there, and they have created a toolkit that when the victim clicks through and goes to the website, depending on what the phishing link was or how they've done it, they in real time pull the logos and the text that's appropriate and build them a custom phishing web page on the fly. So it's been installed on several hundred, apparently, according to Risk IQ, who've been researching this. Erich, you always have thoughts about phishing. What do you think about this? Is this something that you think is just showing the way that people are heading because phishing is so profitable, or is it just a proof of concept?
You said exactly what I was going to say. No, I mean, this is indicative of the way that phishing is evolving, right? And this is pretty interesting. This is actually some pretty smart stuff here. And being able to change this on the fly to deal with those sorts of things is just the next kind of iteration and step. And we talk about phishing. We talk about how, you know, in the old days, people sometimes still associate phishing with the Nigerian prince scam, right? The guy that's trying to give away all this money when actually it's so much more advanced than we think about a lot of times. And this is just an indicator of that. I mean, something that changes on the fly based on what it finds with you, so that it makes it more personal, makes the difference. You know, and we've talked in the past about, you get that text message from Wells Fargo that says, come confirm your bank account, and you don't bank at Wells Fargo. You're like, haha, not today, ISIS, right? But in this case, this is going to be taking something that is that can be personal to that person and make it more realistic and more believable. So, yeah, I think this is pretty amazing. I really do.
Adrian, have you ever been phished successfully?
There have been attempts. I get regular attempts on my Office 365 accounts. For some reason, Microsoft just can't keep that stuff out. You know, it's stuff I never get on my Gmail accounts or, you know, any other. I've got way too many email accounts. I'm sure you guys have several for different things. And I haven't gotten, well, I've gotten a few. So at my new job, you know, we get these, you know, like the CEO's emailing you and it's really urgent. He needs you to like jump on something really quick. And those are very effective at just kind of getting to that part of your brain that's like, you know, makes you scramble, makes you maybe overlook a few things. And we've got an email security provider. I'm not going to shame them right here, but I don't think that stuff should be making it through, because it's like, you know, I'm the CEO and it's coming from Roger at baseball.com or something like that. Like, you know, to a human, it's obvious, but yeah, apparently, with technology and AI and ML and all that, we can't tell that Roger at baseball.com is not the CEO at completely different domain name with a completely different name.
It's funny that you say that, Adrian, because, you mentioned kind of the lizard brain thing there. We get these things from the boss, and it drives us into this. And we talk about this sometimes. Yeah, the system one thinking, right? Which is our reactive lizard brain sort of thinking where, and you said it, we overlook things that we should normally otherwise see. So when we step back and we look at somebody that's fallen for a phishing attack on the outside, and we go, how could you be so stupid and fall for this thing? It's so obvious. It's a whole different story when you're in the middle of it. And they're pretty good at triggering that response.
Yeah. And overall, I think this is evolutionary, not revolutionary. I mean, we've seen attackers, using CSS and scraping logos and images and stuff like that, skinning pages exactly like the real pages for a while now. So, this is just the next evolutionary step there is to automate more of that process to be able to do it dynamically on the fly. But I think we missed a real story there. I think the ad in that story was even more interesting than the story itself.
Yeah, we were discussing this before we came on air. There's this, this ad right over here. It's like something to lock your USB ports, but they're putting something into
the RJ45 port. Yeah. and when we read the headline and it talks about new cybercrime tool, and then you see someone with that down there, I'm trying to figure out what the hell is this tool thing that they're talking about here. And yeah, no, it's an ad. That's okay, folks. If you're on the video portion of this, you were fooled just as much as we are. I'm quite sure of that.
Cool.
I had no idea a product like that existed. These little plastic locks that you insert into ports so nobody can plug something in there.
I may or may not have been with the U.S. government for a while there on the DoD side, and there
Like
may or may not. Well, there may or may not have been a time where USB ports were injected with some epoxy type stuff to make them unusable, especially over on the classified side.
Yeah, you're not alone there, because I remember being at an organization that done something similar, because that was cheaper than getting some sort of DLP, and it was also cheaper than getting it sent back and then getting replacements or what have you. So yeah.
And then the bad guys just use Gmail to exfiltrate all that data.
Yeah.
And we may or may not have tried something through Active Directory pushing a policy that disabled a lot of USB stuff, and then we found out certain things like in some machines, the hard drives controllers actually kind of hung off a USB bus somewhere or another, and it basically nuked that part of the machine. So the physical fix was better than trying to push policy, because there were all these unintended consequences that we found when we enabled shutting down USB period on these machines. That security may or may not have happened. Yeah. Yeah.
With Windows NT4, that's where the golden era was. It just didn't work. USB didn't work on that. So it was all good. Anyway, moving swiftly on to something a bit more optimistic. Emotet botnet taken down by international police swoop. I like the word swoop. It's like it conjures up images of them like Batman swooping in.
Yeah, there's zip lines or something like that. They're riding in on zip lines, crashing through windows.
Yeah. But this is actually big news. I mean, this is huge, because Emotet was massive in the ransomware space, and they're operating everywhere. And ransomware, like we know, terrorizes so many organizations all over the world. And these kinds of operations actually did a significant blow to the infrastructure and the people that are running it.
So they've been trying to do this for a while. I've seen steady stories over the last year of them trying, like, taking down portions of the Emotet infrastructure, and like the next day the bad guys are back up and running, and they couldn't figure out how. So apparently they finally figured out like where to hit it to take it down. I don't know the details of the Emotet infrastructure, but like you said, usually when big companies get ransomware and you see those stories, it's not just the ransomware piece. Like, that's usually the third or fourth stage. And often Emotet, along with some clever phishing, some emails, is the first stage of those attacks. And yeah, if you can stop Emotet, you're killing a lot of these attacks. I'm sure they'll find something else. They'll stand up new infrastructure, but this is going to slow them down for a while, I think.
Yeah, ransomware has become, in many cases, kind of that last thing they do as they're walking out the door. You see our hero or the villain walking out, pulls the pin, chucks the grenade behind him, and everything explodes behind him as they walk away slowly. That's been ransomware in a lot of cases lately, right? We have the data exfiltration. We have all of this other stuff that happens, and then they just lob the grenade on the way out the door. And we don't think about the stuff that happened before. So yeah, Emotet has been on the front lines of getting in and getting those machines owned in the first place. And then all of the other stuff happens behind it. So it'll be interesting to see how long this stays down, and or like in so many other ways, there's always somebody just waiting to step in and take over in another way. And so, we play whack-a-mole on this kind of stuff all the time. Look at May's ransomware decided to retire, and then boom, there's more in its place right away. The RAS stuff is like, okay, we got you. And everybody just kind of like shuffles over to that new one for a while, and then that gets taken down. And then, so it'll be interesting to see how long this lasts.
Yeah, with hindsight on these kinds of incidents, I think it's important to remember that generally they don't take steps back. With every success that we have, they're like, like they'll regroup and they'll say, okay, how can we make this even more effective or even better? So we've got to be even more on our guard for what comes next.
Yeah, thanks for bringing down the tone. Okay, so Solarwinds. So there's two stories. There's Solarwinds story that I think everyone's or most people are familiar with now. They got popped, in the supply chain and lots of government things and all that kind of good stuff. Lots of opinions and analysis out there.
There's some classic PR there. Like, don't look at us. It could hit you too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this could happen to anyone. And then an interesting one that came out not too long after was Sonicwall, which is not so clear because there appears to be a lot of hand waving and a lot of there could be a 0 day, there could not be a 0 day. Maybe we were breached, maybe we weren't breached, and people are a bit unsure about that. So I'll ask for your thoughts on that first, Adrian, and then we'll move on from there. But what do you make of the let's start with Sonicwall. What do you make of that, the whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure really. I don't know that we should really be that concerned about whether there's a 0 day or not a 0 day, because it's something that we need to be prepared for regardless. Oftentimes when we find out about this stuff, it's after it could have done damage to us anyway. So, in most of these cases, I'd say don't get too tangled up in the story. Even if you're a customer, certainly be looking for weird stuff going on. But generally it's just chop wood, carry water, regardless, it's those same basics you should have been doing. When we analyze the outcomes of most of these things, we find, oh, look, failing to do the basics, got you in hot water here. And these other companies, didn't get owned by this because they just did some basic things that were recommended back in the, late 90s, early 2000s. Like in a lot of these cases, and I think like the Solarwinds, simply having, proxy, that requires authentication, stops a lot of this communication from getting out, a lot of the C2 communication. So yeah, who knows? It sounds like they're, hair on fire all over the place, as they're trying to figure out what's going on. I think that article, I saw that story get updated where they said, we checked some of our products. We found no evidence of backdoors or anything like that. So yeah, we'll eventually find out. But I'm really interested to see the detailed reports that come out of all this. When the U.S. government on a lot of these U.S. companies requires full investigation and generally those incident response reports will come out, and those are great to dig into if you're a defender. Like, find out exactly how that happened, compare it to your environment and see how, would you have stopped it, or would have gotten you too?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting, Adrian, you mentioned that, some of the basics at play can help with this. In the 6.4 seconds Javvad gave us to read this article, I happened to notice that one of the things that they're pushing out there as a mitigation for this is enabling 2FA, right? Which is kind of a no-brainer in this day and age.
Only someone told us to do that before now.
Yeah. And we understand it's not the end all be all. MFA is not the thing that cures everything. It really isn't. There's ways around that. We know that it's not perfect, but by God, it should be just our basic kind of rollout and configuration these days is to enable 2FA or MFA on everything we possibly can.
And there's ways to do it fairly painlessly these days. I mean, you've got tons of options. Yeah. There's less and less excuse for not doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to point out too, we talked about this just briefly beforehand, but here we have the organization, something happened and they're not really sure what happened yet. And kudos to them though. What they need to do is they need to keep the stream of communication open, letting people know, hey, this is what we found out now, or even updates like, hey, we're still looking into this. We see that it may not be this or this. They've got to keep that communication stream open. And the second part of that is there's a lot of times, I know I've been in the situation where something's gone wrong in an organization and we spend a lot of time going, what happened? And we're digging for it. We're trying to figure it out. So I can't beat them up too bad because there's a lot of places that end up in that spot where it takes a while to figure out just what happened, especially if they're really good adversaries and they don't just leave the glaring, smoking hole where they came in the front door.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I think you make a very good point there, Eric, as much as it pains me to say that. But I think it's that transparency is so important. And we've been seeing like more examples over the years of organizations where they've been actually very good at explaining what's going on. I think still like there's different levels of transparency and how good they are in communicating it. So the really good ones, they're like, this is what we know. These are the systems. This is what we've done, and it really lays it out in a way that you actually gain confidence that they know what they're looking for and they have a proper IR plan that they're following. And I'm not saying this or other companies don't, but sometimes it's layers of PR that get involved or lawyers get involved. And they're like, hey, don't say this, don't say that, don't tell them the name of your systems or how many users you have. Just vaguely word it, and I think that's detrimental to comms.
So FireEye kicked off all these stories in the public, and I think they set a great example on how to do that. They burned a bunch of their tools by sharing all the details, because they're afraid of them being used, against others. And, day one, tons of detail. Day two, even more detail, stuff on GitHub. And that's kind of an extreme example, but they weren't the most typical company either. But it's good that they set a great example for that at the beginning of this, especially as I think by day 3, day 4, we were seeing this is going to be a story for months, it's going to unfold over a long period of time. So it's great that somebody set that good transparency and communication example at the very beginning.
It's very much the un-Uber. Whereas Uber was like, nothing happened here. These are not these are not the ponages you were looking for. We saw how that did not play well, and hopefully, they're the poster child for how not to do this. And I am happy to see that when organizations can come up, because we know that this happens. Okay, and so nobody just pounces on an organization anymore just because something went wrong. The big difference is how they handle it once it's gone squirrely on them, and letting people know and keeping that communication open and giving people the confidence to know that this organization is working on it and they're going to be forthright when they figure it out is as important as knowing right away what it is that went wrong.
How to go from PR mistake to grand jury in one quick step.
Anyway, Adrian, you early alluded to your new job. Do you care to share with us what that is and who you sold your soul to this time?
Yeah, sure. So it's, it's a little, there's a lot going on. So this company called Cyber Risk Alliance acquired a bunch of media and events companies. So they, InfoSec World is part of CRA, Security Weekly. All those podcasts are now part of CRA. SE Media, which owns SE Magazine, and a host of, they've got some events and awards and different things. And then a few CISO event companies was all brought into this one organization. And there's some really neat stuff we can do with all this as part of one organization here. And I was brought on to head up the labs component and to build that out. And what we're doing is I'm taking the old SE Magazine product reviews and totally redoing that. It's going to be a different process. Before they outsourced the lab component, it's going to be all in-house. I'm going to go much more in depth and focus much more on the ownership experience. I looked out there and interviewed a lot of people over the years. This is something I've been thinking about since I started at 451. I remember when interviewing for that job, I asked Wendy Nather, how often do we get hands-on experience with products? And she was like, well, honestly, somebody's going to, PowerPoint you and you're going to write about the company based on that. And, there's some due diligence that you do, but, there's not a whole lot of time to, get a license and throw something in a lab and test it out. So I saw this, this huge need for understanding what it's like to own these products. So I wasn't seeing any product reviews that told you, here's how long it takes to get this thing up and running. Here's how many people you need to run it. All those details, especially right out of the gate that you run into, Javvad, I'm sure you vividly remember doing that shelfware report back at 451.
Yeah,
that's the stuff we want to know. Like what are the chances that, we spend $250,000 on this or a couple million on this and, it just fails because we don't have the people or the skills to get this thing up and running or keep it up and running. Am I going to have to pay for professional services on top of this? If it's a SIM or something like that, how hard is it to build a parser for all my custom stuff? All these things I've never seen in a product review, so I'm really excited about getting this started. I'm also terrified because it's few people on the Security Weekly side are helping out as well. So Paul Asadorian's going to be involved. Matt Alderman's going to be involved. But a large portion of it, a lot of the writing, a lot of the testing, building out the lab is, building out the new processes is all me. So it's, it's both exciting and a little terrifying at the same time, which I think is where you want to be, if you want to challenge yourself.
That's actually really cool, Adrian. I'm excited to see that because, in the past, having purchased software and quote unquote solutions, which we all know there is no solution, but anyways,
we were banned from using that word at 451 for that reason.
So were we, because but it doesn't stop marketing. Anyways, so often we end up with this thing, and we find out that the capex is minor compared to the opex, and the operational expense being monetary and labor wise, right? And so this is how things get partially deployed. And they get this thing in, and you got two people on your team, and this is going to be a great SIM. And it turns out it needs a team of 5 highly trained individuals on this particular SIM. And it's a great SIM, but damn it, we don't need that for our dentist office or, whatever it is. And there's so much of that goes around when it comes to marketing and stuff like that it's easy to get blindsided by the actual operational expense of a lot of these things over the capital expense.
Yeah. Somebody goes to an event or something like that, and then, now the priority's on something else and it gets dropped, and the attention all flips somewhere else. Or you have an incident, and the results of that incident, make you aware of another gap you have. And these other 3 products over here, just get forgotten, maybe not completely forgotten about until they're needed again in the next incident. But I think we've all been there where we end up just jumping from fire to fire and never get the stuff properly configured.
Well, on the other side, you have these products that when an executive is walking through the airport and they see this wonderful billboard that says breaches are ended if you buy this product. So, the executive comes back and says, we need this widget in place. And you end up buying this widget, you deploy it just so you can say it's deployed. But now you have this other thing that you have to operate, and there's no way around it because the leadership. But that's a whole nother issue in and of itself.
Yeah. So I mean, I get a copy of Consumer Reports in the mail and I see that tagline, keeping companies honest since 19 whatever, whenever they were founded back in the 50s or something like that, I think. I'm like, our industry needs that. And I want to do that.
Yeah,
awesome.
No, that sounds absolutely amazing. And it sounds like a huge undertaking, but yeah, I know we've spoken about this many times in the past, and you expressed your desire to do something like that. I guess the big question is like, how do you protect yourself from the inevitable backlash that will come from vendors that aren't happy when you give them an unfavorable rating?
Yeah, so it's actually, I don't think it's a difficult formula, and I kind of scratch my head when I see people screwing it up. But transparency is a big piece of it. Like if you've got a rating system, if you've got I don't know, let's say a quadrant or something like that, tell people how that thing is calculated, how a vendor, ends up in one square versus another square, or, how the score was calculated, details on your methodology. And we've seen like NSS Labs is a great example because they did an excellent job with transparency with the methodology and things like that. But then some of their actions, on the other hand, when a vendor said, yeah, we don't agree with your methodology, we don't want to be part of this testing, they decided, you know what, you don't get to choose that. We're going to make you part of this testing, whether you like it or not. And I feel like that was strategically the wrong move there. And that, lawsuit just wrapped up, I think in earlier 2020, and then, NSS Labs shuttered and reopened. So we'll see if, how they go from there. I forget the new name, but same company, same approach. And they're probably the closest to what we're doing here, except, again, I'm not going to focus as much on the performance stuff. I don't think the average person, like maybe the Facebooks, care about the packets per second and whether or not it can handle their, 100 kajillabits, data center throughput and stuff like that. But most people, what they need to know is, like you said, Eric, more the operational stuff. Mm-hmm. How hard is this? How much work is this going to take for my team?
Kajillabits, huh?
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
So yeah, I mean, build in a release valve. If somebody really doesn't want to be part of a group test that I'm doing, I'm not gonna force them into it. I'm gonna let them out. As opposed to getting sued. Yeah, I think that's a wise choice on my part.
See, you said relief valve. My brain went right to my old checkpoint firewall that would go into bypass a few times a day. And that's what I thought of when I thought of release valve. I'm like, oh, great. Let's just go into bypass and quit with the IPS.
I'm in the car, so I'm thinking blow-off valve, like a turbo's blow-off valve.
Gotcha. Fair enough. And I'll bet, when it comes to your reporting on this, I think that how you phrase certain things are going to make a difference in how you will be respected in that. So if you start out a review with "Never have I seen a bigger band of bumbling idiots," that
me and Javvad have tact, right?
Yeah, I'm Mr. Tact. Yeah, so I can always help out.
Oh man,
nothing to worry about, Eric. Nothing to worry about.
This will be interesting to see what happens, because I think it's important to have that kind of honest sort of review and to take it from the ownership side. Like, what does it cost to own this is invaluable to people. So good luck with that, really, sincerely.
Yeah. Thank you. Looking forward to it. Another thing we're building is a company and product directory. So we're hoping, we can build that into kind of an industry standard. Like when you're looking for a product or you're saying, I wonder who KnowBe4's competitors are. Like you can just pop into our directory, get a listing, down to like the feature level, so you can really compare these different products, and the product reviews I do will help feed that database, especially those more detailed specifics, that you want to know about when shopping for products.
That in itself as well is a mammoth task. Just maintaining a database of all the vendors, all the new startups, and then the mergers and acquisitions and the name changes and all that kind of stuff. It's
excited and terrified.
So we can expect in about 2 years, Adrian's going to come up for air.
You know what? Hopefully, this will be the time Adrian start losing hair, start going grey. Because I've been waiting for that in the 10 years I've known him or so. I don't know. I've not seen it.
It'll be like that president before and after picture.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, yes. So in terms of the organization, what's it called again? Sorry, the one that
Cyber Risk Alliance.
Cyber Risk Alliance. So if they're looking to pick up any other podcasts, for six figures, mates rates, then let us know.
I will. I'll do that.
No. So one thing, though, that on a serious note, on the directory side of things. So I was talking to another organization not too long ago, and they're doing something similar in trying to build out a directory or what have you. And I was like, you know what? We tried to even just keep a track of security vendors, and it was impossible. And they were like, well, yeah, we've got our tools and methods to do it. And I was like, okay, fair enough. But one thing is also people don't necessarily always know what they're looking for. So I think having it something that's easy for them to know. So sometimes they know I need something that's EDR. Other people don't actually know they're looking for EDR. They're just saying, right, I want something that can protect against X, well, like ransomware or something else. So other people will phrase it in a different way. And I think trying to build that kind of service where it assists the buyers in understanding what exactly is out there, as opposed to just saying, here are the direct competitors of X, Y, Z, but maybe more looking at what their outcomes are or what they're trying to achieve. Because you can achieve the same thing with vastly different products from a security controls perspective at times as well.
That's an excellent point, and it's something that has occurred to me. And for a 2.0 version of the directory, something I want to do is have a natural language type search capability where you can say, I'm worried about ransomware, and it can show you some results. And in fact, on the product review side, some of these group reviews I'm doing are not just isolated to technical categories. Like one of the group reviews I'm going to do is preventing ransomware. So that's going to be a combination of anti-phishing, of email security, of maybe even vulnerability management, configuration management. A lot of those middle stage malwares, to pivot throughout the network and ensure they can get that ransomware on as many systems in your organization as possible. You will use vulnerabilities or dump passwords and things like that. So that group test would have a bunch of vendors in it. And the way I'm putting it together so that it's not hundreds of vendors is I'm picking out ones that specifically market themselves as good for stopping or preventing ransomware or recovering from. So all the way from how it gets in, usually through a phishing email or something like that, to recovering your data and restoring your data and everything in between. There'll be a mix of vendors in there. And the common thing between them is they'll all say, we can stop ransomware.
Fantastic. No, that sounds brilliant.
Just real quick, Adrian, before you put a lot of effort into the ransomware thing, I just want to point out earlier in the show, we talked about Emotet being dead. So ransomware is gone now. It's not even a problem anymore. Maybe we need
that's why I pushed that one out. I'm not sure what's going to happen. So, that one's more October timeframe. Hedging my bets there.
Excellent. So were you also, so a couple of years ago when you were at Thinkst with Harun, and you and him both
wasn't that long ago. It feels like it though.
No. A couple of years ago, you gave a talk here in London at the can't remember the name of the conference now. Yeah, and in that, as part of that talk, you'd done some research where you'd gone and set up a fictitious CMO on LinkedIn and you paid for awards.
Yeah.
And companies gave you, I mean, could you just recap that? Because I think that ties in nicely with what you're trying to do. And I know you're not paying away, but I think our listeners would appreciate that story.
It does. And in fact, I'll be using some of the infrastructure and the resources I built for that talk in the product testing. So I've got fake companies and fake people that are getting tons of phishing emails and spam. So they've already got years of junk in their inboxes that I can use to test different security products against. So yeah, basically what we did is the talk was called "The Products We Deserve." So really easy to look up and find on YouTube. And it was just kind of this systematic look at some of the more negative aspects of marketing in our industry. And one of the first things I talk about in that talk is it's really not just our industry. You see it all over. Awards are used, to give prospective customers some kind of, feeling of comfort. This is a real company, a real product. People have used it. It's won awards. It's to give the consumers some level of confidence before buying. And I did some surveys and I found actually it doesn't. At least in our industry, a lot of people, if they see a bunch of awards plastered on your website, 40% of those people will disregard you entirely. Like it gives them, kind of a, runs a chill up their spine. They're like, yeah, this doesn't feel right. And they take their business elsewhere and I think the reason for that is it's not that all awards are bad. It's that some are really, really bad. And the average person doesn't know which ones are really, really bad, that you just whip out a credit card and you can buy an award. And so they just assume they're all bad. So again, this goes back to transparency and why transparency is so important when doing any kind of research or analysis of products or posting any research, because as long as there's one that's trying to pull the wool over your eyes, you're going to assume it's everybody, because that transparency isn't there for you to make that judgment call yourself. So yeah, we focused on everything from the analyst side, and it was kind of interesting because me and Haroon don't exactly see eye to eye on the analyst side. I feel like industry analysts can do some good, and he's past that. He's it's just the model itself is too much of a mess. And his point there is that it's too easy to bias the analysts. You can take your dollars, your marketing dollars, and by spending more money, you can talk to the analysts more. And the more you talk to the analysts, naturally, they're going to be biased to you. Naturally, when IDS or whatever category it is comes up, that company that spends the most marketing dollars so that they can have inquiry calls and advisory calls with you, bring you out to their campus for a strategy day, that kind of thing. They're going to pop up first just because you spend the most time with them. There's nothing nefarious going on there. The analyst is still being honest, but that's the way human brains work. They're now biased towards that company that they spend the most time with. And that bootstrapped company that spends $0 with analysts, nobody ever hears about from the analysts.
Yeah, and if you're most familiar with that group already, then you're obviously going to lean towards feeling comfortable recommending them, I would assume.
So he's got a really good point there. And just from my experience, I feel like we still do need somebody like the analyst to explain some of this stuff. There's a lot of good to be done there, where just going to a company's website half the time, especially if it's a new category and they haven't quite figured out the messaging yet. You can go to a website, download all the things off the website, read the whole thing, and still have no idea what they do. So it's good to have somebody, that's gonna, write up something in plain language, strip out all the marketing, and say, here's the category they're in. Here's what they do. It's an appliance you put in your data center. Here's how it's licensed. And in a paragraph, you can have a better understanding than the hours you spend on the website scouring it for something something to grasp onto.
That helps us better understand how a tool can I don't know, block USB by sticking something in an RJ45 port.
Yeah,
bring up old stuff, but I'm still thinking about that particular tool. And you know, what does it actually do? It's kind of funny because we did have that question looking at that ad.
But you know, we figured it out just from looking at that ad. Just from that one picture, we could say, "Oh, okay, you need a special tool to insert and remove these so that nobody can plug stuff into your systems." You know, that's actually an example of doing it right. You know, because in that one picture, you know, that's the whole thing the product does right there. You know, now you know pretty much all the features. You know what the purpose of it is. You know, but some of these they spend so much time talking about the problem they solve, or you know, how they implement the technology. Like, let's talk about AI and ML, or they use some kind of metaphor, you know, like antibodies, and they, you know, like this human body fighting viruses and bacteria's analogy. And they get so lost in that, the marketing folks, that you're left with no idea whether or not you actually need this product, or if it's 100% overlap with something you already own. You're left with no idea.
There's a certain talk circuit that I think Javvad and I do a little bit with a gentleman out of the UK. It's actually a really good group of people getting together. But one of the vendors that I've noticed recently, his entire presentation is actually putting up these videos. And they're all marketing videos and rah, and like all this sexy stuff. And it goes for like several minutes. And most of his time is done through these marketing videos. And frankly, when we get done, I'm kind of wondering, is this, you know, threat analysis? Is this, you know, what does this group actually do? I mean, it's sexy. It's great. It looks like something out of a Tom Clancy flick. But you're right. I have no idea what they actually do at the end of the day, other than, wow, they make a pretty impressive looking video. So
yeah, again, to defend my position, I'll share one quick story where I think it's fair to call them out by name at this point, you know, because it's a positive story. You know, they actually fixed the issue. But the first time I ever talked to Risk IQ, I remember telling them, "Hey guys, we're 62 minutes in, and I have no idea what you do." You know, and it was one of those things. It was like, I know what problem space you're going after. Like, you did a really good job of outlining the problem statement for 62 minutes. But I don't know what the solution is. You know, I don't know what form it takes. I don't know how it's licensed, how I would use it, where I would plug it in to my security program. And then I talked to them 9 months later, and just night and day. First 5 minutes, just nailed it. And I stopped them and I said, "Guys, this is so much better than it was." And to me, that was really rewarding as an analyst to see, you know, to give that feedback and to see it have a positive impact on how a company was doing their messaging and talking about their product.
Yeah, that happens so much. Or it's like, I remember in some briefings they'd spend all their time speaking about competitors who they were nothing like. Apparently, it's like, we're better than FireEye, but we're nothing like FireEye, and FireEye this and Fire. And at the end, you look at your notes and it's all got the competitor's name in there, nothing about them, and you're like, okay. It's
kind of like dating, I imagine. Not that I've ever really done dating.
When someone talks about their ex all the time.
yeah, they can, or you know, they talk too much about themselves, or you know, not what they can do for you. You know, I imagine it's like that.
Are you on the market again, Adrian? That's the question then.
No, I've got my hands full with teenagers and with building a directory and product reviews.
So, ladies, what Adrian's saying is, if you can make time around his busy schedule, then @Sawaba is his Twitter ID.
I would not wish that on anybody right now.
Cool. Well, that's great. But no, thank you so much for joining us, Adrian. It's always a pleasure. We need to catch up more often anyway. And yeah, it's great. Best of luck with the directory. I say the directory with the lab and the testing and the new job and the teenage kids. And yeah, aren't they something that everyone struggles with at this age?
Teaching them to drive on cars with 3 pedals. Like I'm doing everything hard mode.
Proper driving. Good stuff. Good stuff. Eric, any parting words?
You know, I think it's really important.
It is very important. So thank you so much.
man.
You know, he's got nothing to say. He just like,
Wow.
dead air. Don't feel sorry
What a
for
finish.
Don't feel sorry for him. Come on. You enjoyed being on here, didn't you?
I did.
Excellent. So Adrian enjoyed being on here. Eric thought it was fantastic. We'll see you again next week. Stay secure, my friends.